The winter rain over Manhattan fell like bullets against glass, relentless and cold, drumming against the streets of Little Italy until every surface gleamed black and slick. It was nearly midnight, yet inside the red velvet, the light glowed amber and dangerous. The air hung thick with cigar smoke, aged whiskey, and the particular silence that comes when powerful men conduct business they will never speak of in daylight. The atmosphere felt weighted, as if the room itself understood the cost of every conversation happening within its velvet-draped walls. Sweat gathered at the base of Judith Minix's neck beneath the starched collar of her uniform, mixing with exhaustion she had learned to wear like a second skin, and the crushing awareness that one wrong move in this room could end a life. She had been on her feet for 9 straight hours, her movements reduced to muscle memory as she navigated the smoky shadows where men laughed quietly, toasted deals sealed in blood, and pretended the morning's headlines about missing bodies had nothing to do with them. She moved with the precision of someone who had trained herself to anticipate a customer's needs 3 steps before they formed the thought. Her shoulders ached, her feet burned in the regulation black heels, and the carefully neutral expression she had perfected over 3 years working this room was beginning to feel like a mask sealed permanently to her face. But she could not slow down. Not tonight. Not when her tips would determine whether her brother's next round of physical therapy happened or whether she spent another week fielding calls from collection agencies whose voices had gone from polite to threatening. The main floor of the red velvet hummed with the same Thursday night energy it always did. Men in $1,000 suits loosened their ties after conversations that would send them to prison if recorded. Associates exchanged envelopes across tables, their faces carefully blank. Tourists who had stumbled into the wrong speakeasy drank overpriced cocktails, blissfully unaware they were surrounded by New York's most wanted. Judith slipped through all of it. A silver tray balanced on one hand, her steps soundless on Persian rugs, her words minimal, her presence forgettable. She had learned the first rule of survival in this world: be invisible when dangerous men need privacy, present the instant they require service, and gone before they remember your face. Perhaps that was why she noticed him so acutely tonight. Table 7. Tucked in the far corner with sight lines to every entrance and exit, the table reserved for the man who decided which families prospered and which families disappeared. Ronald Lawrence. She had served him at least twice a month for 18 months. Always the same. Arriving at 10:45 sharp, always with Vincent at his side, ordering Macallan 25 neat, leaving a tip of exactly 30%, never raising his voice, never snapping his fingers for attention, never causing disruption. Yet every server understood that Ronald Lawrence's table demanded perfection, because the one waiter who had brought the wrong whiskey simply stopped showing up for shifts, and no one asked why. And tonight, Judith knew something was catastrophically wrong. Before we continue this story, hit that subscribe button, like the video, and drop a comment letting us know you're watching from. Your support helps us in creating more amazing stories, and trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. Judith Minix had learned to disappear in plain sight. 3 years serving drinks to men who made people vanish had taught her that survival was a discipline, not an accident. See everything. Say nothing. Remember nothing when questioned. Move through the room like smoke, present when summoned, gone before they considered whether you'd heard too much. It was the only philosophy that kept servers alive in places like the Red Velvet, where fortunes changed hands beneath crystal chandeliers and bodies turned up in the East River when deals went wrong. Her schedule was brutal by design. 4 double shifts a week, Tuesday through Friday, 3 p.m. until last call. Weekend shifts at a diner in Queens to fill the gaps. Sleep came in 4-hour increments, stolen between jobs, never enough to silence the anxiety that hummed beneath everything. The math was simple and unforgiving. Her younger brother's medical bills from the car accident totaled $847,000, of which insurance had covered barely half. Physical therapy alone cost $3,200 monthly. Her studio apartment in Astoria took another $1,800. The collection agencies called twice daily now, their patience exhausted, their threat sharpening. Every night at the Red Velvet was a calculation. How much closer to survival? How many more months of this before something broke, her body or her sanity? She had studied Ronald Lawrence the way a scholar studies ancient texts, cataloging patterns, noting every deviation. 18 months of observation had taught her his rhythms. He arrived at 10:45 p.m. every Thursday, sometimes Tuesdays. Always table 7. Always Vincent Caruso at his right hand, tasting every drink first, scanning exits with the paranoia of a man who had survived 2 decades in a business where most died young. Ronald ordered Macallan 25, neat, never varying. He spoke quietly, forcing others to lean in, a power play disguised as courtesy. His security was invisible but absolute. 2 men at the bar who never drank, one at a table near the kitchen, another outside in a black Mercedes with the engine running. He stayed exactly 90 minutes, never more, never less. Left through the back exit that opened into an alley where Vincent's car waited, engine already warm. Vincent had been Ronald's shadow for 12 years, according to kitchen gossip. The muscle that thought, the enforcer who planned. Loyal as a dog, ruthless as a blade, and smart enough to keep Ronald alive when other bosses fell. He was the constant in every equation, the fixed point around which Ronald's operation orbited. Until tonight. Tonight, Vincent's hands trembled when he lit Ronald's cigar. Tonight, his eyes tracked the back exit every 30 seconds like a man watching a clock count down. Tonight, his jaw was clenched so tight Judith could see the muscle jumping beneath the skin. Tonight, Judith realized she was watching a man prepare to commit murder. They arrived at 10:47 p.m., 2 minutes later than usual, and that alone set Judith's instincts vibrating like a tuning fork struck too hard. Ronald moved through the red velvet with his characteristic control, his charcoal suit immaculate, his dark eyes sweeping the room in one practiced assessment before he slid into Table 7's corner booth. Vincent followed half a step behind, and everything about him screamed wrong. Judith was refilling water glasses 3 tables away when she caught it. Vincent's shoulders were rigid, hunched forward slightly as if bracing against pain. His right hand kept moving to his jacket pocket, fingers twitching toward his phone, then forcing themselves still. When he sat down across from Ronald, his movements were jerky, graceless, nothing like the fluid precision she'd observed for 18 months. He arranged himself in the seat twice, unable to find comfort, his eyes already jumping toward the back exit before Ronald had even removed his gloves. She approached Table 7 with her practiced neutrality, setting down cocktail napkins with mechanical precision. "Good evening, Mr. Lawrence. Your usual?" Ronald's voice was calm, measured. "Macallan 25.
Neat.
Vincent. Bourbon. Anything." Vincent's words came too fast, clipped at the edges. His knee bounced beneath the table, a nervous percussion she could see vibrating the wood. Judith noted it without acknowledgement and turned toward the bar. Behind her, she heard Ronald's quieter tone questioning. She didn't catch the words, only Vincent's response, louder than necessary. "I'm fine. Just tired." When she returned with their drinks 4 minutes later, Vincent was typing on his phone beneath the table, the screen's glow illuminating his face in blue fragments. His thumb moved frantically across the keyboard, deleting, retyping, his attention consumed entirely by whatever message he was crafting. Ronald was speaking about a shipment coming through Red Hook, his words unhurried, but Vincent's responses came delayed, distracted, his gaze fixed on the phone even as he nodded. "Vincent." Ronald's voice carried an edge now, subtle but unmistakable. "Are you listening?" Vincent's head snapped up, the phone disappearing into his jacket.
Yes.
"Red Hook. Tuesday night. I've got the crew ready." But his eyes were already drifting back toward the exit. Not the front entrance where Ronald's security maintained their positions, but the back door that led into the alley, the door they always used when leaving. He checked it every 30 seconds now, his attention pulled there by some invisible thread Judith couldn't see, but felt in the way tension radiates before a storm breaks. She refilled their water glasses, silent and efficient, and watched Vincent's fingers begin drumming against the table's edge. A rhythm with no pattern, anxious energy burning through the veneer of control. His jaw clenched and released, clenched and released. Sweat had begun gathering at his temples despite the bar's carefully maintained temperature. Ronald noticed nothing. Or pretended not to. He sipped his whiskey, speaking about territory disputes in Brooklyn, his focus absolute. Vincent checked the back exit again. And Judith knew with cold certainty that whatever was coming, it was coming soon. Judith was clearing rocks glasses from the bar 20 minutes later when the man in the gray suit walked in. He moved with purpose but not urgency, his steps measured, his face forgettable in the way that suggested professional training. He didn't scan the room like a first-time visitor. He knew exactly where he was going. She watched him approach the bar from her peripheral vision, her hands continuing their mechanical work, stacking glasses on her tray with practiced efficiency. He ordered a vodka tonic from Marcus, the bartender, his voice low and even. Then he turned slightly, angling his body toward table 7 while appearing to study the bottles arranged behind the bar. Vincent rose from the booth, murmuring something to Ronald that Judith couldn't hear. Ronald nodded without looking up from his phone, and Vincent crossed the room toward the restrooms. His path took him directly past the bar, past the man in the gray suit, and what happened next lasted perhaps 3 seconds, but burned itself into Judith's memory with perfect clarity. The man's hand moved to adjust his watch. Vincent's hand brushed the bar's polished edge as he passed. The exchange was seamless, practiced, invisible to anyone not watching for it. A thick brown envelope materialized in Vincent's palm, disappearing into his jacket pocket in one fluid motion. No words exchanged. No eye contact. Just the choreography of professionals who had rehearsed this transaction until it became muscle memory. Judith's hands stopped moving. The glass she was holding hovered above the tray, suspended in the moment her suspicion crystallized into certainty. She forced herself to continue, to set the glass down without the tremor that wanted to move through her fingers, to keep her expression blank even as her heartbeat accelerated into her throat. Vincent continued toward the restrooms without breaking stride. The man in the gray suit paid for his drink in cash, left a modest tip, and walked out the front entrance. The entire interaction had taken less than 90 seconds. But Judith was still watching Vincent. She saw him pause before entering the restroom, his hand moving to the envelope in his jacket, confirming its presence. Then his gaze swept across the room, slow and deliberate, landing on the back exit where a man Judith had never seen before stood near the emergency door, pretending to check his phone. Vincent's nod was barely perceptible. A slight dip of his chin, nothing more. But the man at the back exit straightened slightly, his hand moving inside his jacket to touch something Judith couldn't see, but could imagine with terrifying clarity. The man nodded back. Judith set down her tray behind the bar, her mind racing through calculations she had no training for. The envelope was payment. The nod was confirmation. The man at the back exit was positioned exactly where Ronald always departed. Vincent's agitation wasn't guilt or nerves. It was anticipation. This wasn't betrayal being planned. This was betrayal being executed, and she was watching the final minutes count down to murder. Judith retreated to the server station behind the partition, her breath coming shallow and fast, her hands gripping the edge of the counter hard enough to hurt. Ronald Lawrence sat 15 feet away, discussing business with a man who had just confirmed his execution. Vincent had returned to table 7, his demeanor suddenly calm, almost serene, the agitation burned away now that everything was in motion. Every survival instinct Judith had honed over 3 years screamed the same message: do nothing, see nothing, say nothing. Men like Ronald Lawrence lived and died by rules she would never understand, in a world where her intervention meant less than nothing. She was furniture.
Scenery.
A ghost who poured drinks and collected tips and went home alive because she knew her place. She pulled an order pad from her apron, her hands trembling. Wrote 4 words. Vincent betrayed you. Run. Too vague. He'd think she was insane or worse, trying to manipulate him. She tore the page off, crumpled it, shoved it deep into her pocket. Second attempt. Your right-hand man has been paid to kill you.
Too direct.
Too revealing of what she'd witnessed. If she was wrong, if this was some test or setup she didn't understand, She just confessed to spying on a Mafia boss. She destroyed that page too. Her hands were shaking badly now. Across the room, Ronald checked his watch. They'd been here 70 minutes. 20 minutes until he left. 20 minutes until he walked toward that back exit where someone waited with a gun and Vincent's blessing. She could walk away, finish her shift, collect her tips, go home, and never speak of what she'd seen. No one would blame her. No one would even know she'd had the chance to intervene. Ronald Lawrence was not her responsibility. His world was not her world. His death would not be her fault. But another voice whispered beneath the panic, quieter but more insistent. If you let him die when you could have saved him, you'll see his face every time you close your eyes for the rest of your life. Third attempt. Get out now. You're in danger. Could apply to anything. A fire. A threat she'd overheard. Plausible deniability, but useless. He wouldn't leave based on something so empty. She pressed her palms against her temples, her breathing ragged. This was insane. She was a waitress from Queens with $400,000 in debt and a brother who needed her alive. Interfering in whatever was happening at Table 7 was suicide wearing a helpful mask. But her hand was already moving, writing a fourth message in clear, brutal honesty. Your right-hand man sold you out. You're the payment. The back exit is compromised. She stared at the words, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. Then she folded the note 3 times, pressed it between her shaking fingers, and picked up a fresh glass of water for Table 7. Judith approached Table 7 with the water glass balanced on a small tray, the folded note pressed against her palm beneath it, hidden from view. Every step felt like walking through concrete. Her professional smile was locked in place, but beneath her uniform her entire body vibrated with adrenaline that threatened to shatter her composure into 1,000 visible pieces. Vincent was speaking, his voice steady now, relaxed. The Castellano situation should resolve itself by Monday. They don't have the resources to push back. He sipped his bourbon, the picture of loyal efficiency. Ronald nodded, his attention on the documents spread across the table. Make sure they understand the terms are non-negotiable. Judith reached the table. Time contracted, each second stretching into something elastic and strange. She set the water glass down with her right hand, her movements smooth and unremarkable, exactly as she'd done 10,000 times before. Her left hand moved beneath the tray, the note sliding free, her fingers placing it directly under Ronald's whiskey glass with a pressure so light it made no sound. Can I get you gentlemen anything else? Her voice emerged steady, professionally pleasant, betraying nothing of the terror coursing through her veins. Ronald didn't look up. We're fine. Vincent's eyes flicked to her face, holding there for a half-second longer than necessary, and Judith felt ice flood her chest. Had he seen? Did he know? But his expression remained neutral, dismissive, and he returned his attention to Ronald without comment. Judith turned and walked away. She didn't rush, didn't let her steps quicken into anything that might draw attention. She moved with the same measured grace she always employed, weaving between tables, her tray held at the perfect angle, her posture correct. But inside, her mind was screaming. She'd just interfered in something she didn't fully understand, passed a note to one of the most dangerous men in New York accusing his most trusted lieutenant of murder. If she was wrong, if she'd misread the envelope exchange or the nod or Vincent's behavior, she'd just destroyed her own life. Ronald Lawrence didn't forgive mistakes. He erased them. And if she was right, if Vincent discovered what she'd done before Ronald read the note, she wouldn't make it to the end of her shift. Behind her, she heard the subtle sound of paper unfolding. Her heart stopped. She reached the bar, set down her tray with hands that wanted desperately to shake, and forced herself to pick up a towel and begin wiping down glasses. Normal activity. Unremarkable. Invisible. She didn't turn around. Didn't look back toward Table 7. Couldn't bear to see Ronald's reaction. Couldn't risk meeting Vincent's eyes if he'd noticed. She'd done it. The choice was made. The note was delivered. Now all she could do was survive whatever came next. Judith kept her back to table 7, her hands moving through the mechanical motions of polishing glassware while every nerve in her body strained to hear what was happening behind her. The bar's ambient noise, conversation, clinking silverware, jazz playing softly through hidden speakers, felt suddenly deafening, drowning out the one sound she needed to detect. Then she heard it, the whisper of paper being unfolded. She risked a glance in the bar's mirror, the angle giving her a fractured view of table 7. Ronald held the note between 2 fingers, his posture unchanged, his expression absolutely neutral as his eyes tracked across the words. He read it once, then again slower. His face remained carved from stone, revealing nothing. No surprise, no anger, no fear. Just that terrible, calculating stillness that had kept him alive for 2 decades in a business that killed quickly. He folded the note with precise movements and slipped it into his inside jacket pocket. Then he picked up his whiskey glass and drained it in one smooth motion, setting it down with barely a sound. "We're done here." Ronald's voice carried the same measured calm it always did. He stood, buttoning his suit jacket with deliberate care, each button fastened with the same attention he gave everything. Vincent rose immediately, tension flooding back into his shoulders. "I'll bring the car around to the back." His hand was already moving toward his phone, ready to signal whoever waited in that alley that the target was coming. "No need." Ronald adjusted his cuffs. "I'm going through the kitchen. Need to speak with Marcus about next week's order." The lie was so casual, so mundane, that for a split second Vincent didn't react. Then comprehension detonated across his features. His eyes went wide, his mouth opening, the careful composure he'd rebuilt after the envelope exchange shattering like glass. "Boss, wait." Vincent lunged forward, his hand reaching for Ronald's arm. "The kitchen? Why would you?" But Ronald was already moving, his steps unhurried but purposeful, heading not toward the back exit where death waited, but directly toward the kitchen doors. His security team materialized from their positions, flanking him without breaking stride, a practiced formation that happened in seconds. Vincent stood frozen at table 7, his hand still extended, his face cycling through panic and calculation. Judith watched him in the mirror as the truth crystallized behind his eyes. The plan had failed. Ronald knew, and Vincent had just revealed himself by trying to stop him. The kitchen doors swung shut behind Ronald and his security. Beyond them lay the walk-in freezer, and behind that, the door that opened onto tunnels dug during Prohibition, passages that connected to 3 different buildings 2 blocks away. Escape routes that only the most trusted knew about. Routes Vincent had apparently forgotten to sell along with everything else. Vincent's hand went to his phone, his fingers moving in frantic patterns across the screen, and Judith saw the exact moment he activated whatever contingency plan had been designed for this scenario. His face had gone pale, sweat now visible on his forehead, and when he looked up from the phone his eyes were wild with the desperation of a man watching his execution approach in real time. 2 men at the bar stood simultaneously. They'd been nursing drinks for the past hour, looking like any other customers unwinding after work. Now their hands moved inside their jackets with professional speed, emerging with compact pistols that caught the amber light. Marcus, the bartender Judith had worked alongside for 2 years, dropped behind the counter and came up holding a shotgun. "Everyone down." The shout came from one of the armed men, his weapon sweeping across the dining room. Judith's body reacted before her mind caught up, her knees buckling as she dropped behind the bar, her hands covering her head. The tray she'd been holding crashed to the floor, glass exploding in a spray of shards. Around her, the bar erupted into chaos. Screaming, chairs scraping, tables overturning as customers dove for cover. Vincent was already moving, sprinting toward the kitchen doors, toward the tunnel entrance where Ronald had disappeared. "Lock it down." "He can't." The gunshot was deafening in the enclosed space. But it didn't come from the men at the bar. It came from table 12, where a woman Judith had served earlier, quiet, professional, drinking white wine, now stood with a gun aimed at Vincent's center mass. "Don't move, Vincent." 3 more of Ronald's people revealed themselves in perfect synchronization. The couple at table 8. The man near the restrooms. They'd been there all along, embedded in the crowd, invisible until the moment they were needed. Their weapons trained on the two men at the bar and on Marcus, whose shotgun suddenly seemed like a very poor decision. Drop them. Now. The woman's voice was cold, absolute. The man nearest to her hesitated, his pistol wavering. The sound of a hammer being cocked came from behind him, another of Ronald's security, positioned at the front entrance, blocking any escape. His weapon clattered to the floor. His partners followed. Marcus set the shotgun on the bar with shaking hands, his face drained of color. Vincent stood frozen in the middle of the room, his path to the kitchen blocked by two of Ronald's men who had materialized from the shadows near the wine storage. He turned slowly, his hands rising, his eyes scanning for any exit that wasn't covered. There was none. 90 seconds. That's how long it took for Ronald's real security to neutralize the threat, to lock down every person who had been part of Vincent's plan. The Rossetti infiltrators were on their knees, hands behind their heads. Vincent stood among them, his breathing ragged, his 12 years of loyalty dissolved in a single catastrophic miscalculation. Ronald Lawrence didn't survive 2 decades by trusting anyone completely. Not even the man at his right hand. The red velvet cleared within 20 minutes. Ronald's people removed Vincent and the Rossetti infiltrators through a service entrance, while legitimate customers were ushered out the front with apologies and complimentary bottles of wine to ensure their silence. Judith remained behind the bar, her legs still unsteady, her hands still trembling with adrenaline that had nowhere to go now that the violence had ended as quickly as it began. The manager told her to finish her shift, his voice tight with stress, and she did, moving through the motions of cleanup with mechanical precision while her mind replayed everything in fragmented loops. The envelope. The nod. The note sliding beneath Ronald's glass. The gunshot that had nearly shattered her eardrums. By the time she clocked out at 2:30 a.m., the bar looked normal again, as if nothing had happened. As if men hadn't drawn weapons and a 12-year partnership hadn't ended in betrayal. She collected her tips, $3.40, a good night by any measure, and walked out into rain that had intensified into a punishing downpour. The streets of Little Italy were empty, water rushing along gutters, neon signs reflecting in fractured colors across wet pavement. Judith walked fast, her jacket pulled tight, her awareness sharpened to a painful edge. Every footstep behind her sounded like a threat. Every car that passed could contain someone sent to tie up loose ends. She'd saved Ronald Lawrence's life, but that didn't mean she was safe. It might mean the opposite. She reached her apartment building in Astoria 45 minutes later, soaked through, exhausted, and still vibrating with fear. The black SUV was waiting at the curb, engine running, windows tinted dark enough to hide whoever sat inside. Judith stopped on the sidewalk, her keys gripped between her fingers like a weapon, her mind racing through options that all ended the same way. 2 men in dark suits stepped out. Professional.
Calm.
Their hands visible, empty of weapons but radiating the quiet menace of people who didn't need guns to be dangerous. Miss Minix. The taller one spoke with perfect courtesy. Mr. Lawrence requests your presence. Not asks. Not invites. Requests. The word that wasn't a question.
Now.
Her voice came out steadier than she felt.
Now.
She looked at her apartment building, at the warm light in windows where people slept safe and unaware, then back at the SUV. She could run, could scream, could try to refuse. But they all knew how this ended. Ronald Lawrence didn't make requests that could be declined. She got in the back seat. They drove in silence through rain-soaked streets, heading toward Manhattan, toward neighborhoods where buildings cost more than she'd earn in 10 lifetimes. The Upper East Side materialized through the rain-streaked windows, brownstones with manicured trees, streets that looked like old money and older secrets. The SUV stopped in front of a 4-story brownstone with black shutters and brass fixtures that gleamed even in the rain. One of the men opened her door. 3rd floor. He's waiting. The brownstone's interior matched its exterior. Old money translated into dark wood paneling, Persian rugs worn soft by generations, oil paintings in gilded frames depicting scenes from a world that no longer existed. Judith climbed the stairs with one of the suited men behind her, her wet shoes leaving prints on marble that probably cost more than her yearly rent. The third floor opened into a study that smelled of leather, with smoke and aged whiskey. A fire burned in a stone fireplace, casting shifting shadows across floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. Ronald Lawrence sat behind a massive mahogany desk, a crystal glass in his hand, still wearing the same charcoal suit from the bar. He looked exactly as composed as he had before someone tried to kill him. "Sit." He gestured to the leather chair across from him. Judith sat, her hands folded in her lap to keep them from shaking, her clothes still damp and clinging uncomfortably to her skin. The door closed behind her with a soft click. They were alone. Ronald studied her for a long moment, his dark eyes unreadable, calculating something she couldn't guess. Then he spoke, his voice carrying the same measured calm it always did. "Vincent is dead. His body will be delivered to the Rossetti family in pieces over the next week." A message about the cost of ambition. Judith said nothing. There was nothing to say. "You saved my life tonight." Ronald set down his glass with precise care. "That creates a debt. I don't leave debts unpaid." Her mouth was dry. "I don't want anything." "Everyone wants something, Miss Minix." He leaned back in his chair. "The question is whether you know what you want yet." He opened a desk drawer and removed a leather folder, sliding it across the mahogany surface toward her. $1 million.
Cash.
Untraceable. Plus permanent protection. Anyone who touches you answers to me. You take the money, disappear to whatever life you want, and we never speak again. Judith stared at the folder, her heart hammering. $1 million. Her brother's medical bills paid. Her debt erased. Freedom.
Or.
Ronald's voice sharpened, commanding her attention back to his face. "You step into my world. Learn what real power costs, how it's built, how it's maintained. I'll teach you to command fear instead of feel it, to move through this city untouchable, to never again watch dangerous men and wonder if tonight is the night you die." The fire crackled in the silence. Outside, rain hammered against windows that probably cost more than her car. "If I choose the second option," Judith heard herself say, her voice steadier than she expected, "what do you get?" Ronald smiled, a cold expression that didn't reach his eyes. "Loyalty that can't be bought. You prove tonight you'll risk everything to do what's right, even when staying silent would be safer. That's rare. That's valuable." Judith looked at the folder on the desk. $1 million and safety. Everything she'd worked for. Then she looked at Ronald Lawrence, the man who decided which families lived and which disappeared. "Teach me." Ronald's smile widened fractionally. He opened another drawer and removed a small velvet box, opening it to reveal a gold signet ring engraved with a family crest, a lion holding a sword. He slid it across the desk. "Then you belong to me now. And I protect what's mine." Subscribe if you believe real power comes from protecting your own. Cowards and betrayers won't subscribe.